Hello, Andres.
Hey, Dennis.
Welcome to Behind the Scenes.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
I very much like the fact that you have been both in the retail environment from a technology point of view, but also in wholesale. So I think you're the one of the persons that I know that kind of has that width and breadth. And I would like to just be happy to pick your brain on some topics.
Sure. I feel I've been involved with retail also for personal reasons. My family also works in retail in Colombia. So my first working experience was actually in a clothing store as a sales assistant, as a sales associate.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that was my first touch point with retail. I never would have imagined that now, fast forward 20 years, I will still be working in retail somehow. But happy to share
Yeah.
some of that experience.
I didn't know. That is even better. So I have something new that I would like to kick off this episode with. I call it hype or ripe. So I got a list of 10 trends and technologies that are, in my opinion, making waves or have been making waves in the fashion and sports industry. And I'm curious to hear your take on each of them.
Oh,
Do you think that they are ripe for widespread adoption by 2025? Or are they still just a hype more than a substance?
okay.
So
I'm
let's
actually
hear.
very curious to see what is in your list.
Yeah, I did not share it with you before, just to surprise you a little bit.
Hmm.
So let's start with the first one. I want to hear hype or ripe, and feel free to comment if you really want to, but we can always circle back and deep dive into each topic later on. So,
Hmm.
3D in fashion, hype or ripe?
Right. So 3D in fashion, I think, is definitely something that I think it's been in the industry, in the fashion industry now for quite some years.
Mm-hmm.
But especially last year, I got the feeling that it actually managed to settle and to become really part of the product creation cycle. And I think 3D goes um, beyond what the original scope was, which I think was okay, let's try to reduce the cost and not produce samples for certain styles or certain colors of a product. And it has evolved to much more. So
Um,
3D for
I'm
me, right.
ripe, perfect. Digital signage in the stores.
Hype.
Oh, I so much want to stay here and ask why, but I'll continue. Unified omnichannel shopping experience.
Oh, this is a very, very interesting one.
Mhm.
Um, Well, and I usually like to have a very precise answer for this topic, but I find myself in an in between. So
Mm-hmm.
can we have an in between for this one and discuss it later?
Sure. In between.
Yes,
Um, okay, this one has also been circulating quite a lot. Big data, unifying all data sources.
right.
Oh, so no more Excels, right? Live video shopping in the European market.
I think it's the European market is still differentiated. Like you have so many different cultures, and I think culture plays a big role in the way you sell.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think depending on where, it will be a hype or ripe. But if I consider the overarching Europe, I will say it's a hype.
Can you just quickly name which country you think it is a ripe?
I think the Scandinavian countries are using video conference and technology around video conference to do selling or to
Mhm.
sell product, to sell stories a lot better than Southern European markets, where maybe that in-person approach is still quite valuable for customers, so the
Mhm.
brands stick to it. Yeah.
All right. Next one. metaverse fashion shows and experiences.
Well, I don't have too much experience in this area, but I would say it's still a hype.
Mm-hmm. Here comes another one that's recently been circulating and getting some trends: VR and AR shopping.
But definitely a hype.
Okay, staying the hype for 2025, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Mhm. All right. NFTs as a digital ownership for physical products.
Hype.
Circular economy models in fashion.
I think brands would like to say it's not a hype, but ripe. I think that's what everyone is aiming for.
Mm,
Um, I believe we are in the transition from hype to ripe, where circular economies and sustainability are becoming a core part of the fashion industry and the brands, and no longer a differentiator as it used to be in the past, where the only brand you could think about that was sustainable was probably Patagonia, and everybody else was just greenwashing. But I think
mhm.
now brands are slowly but surely transitioning to making this a right.
Yep, that's cool. All right, and the 10th last trend: AI in wholesale selling.
Um, I believe it is still a hype with a lot of potential, but it's still a hype. It's very new.
Mhm. Got it. All right, these were 10 quick ones.
If I look at the list
Mhm,
that you just brought up, I mean, all of these are very promising technologies. All of these are, or maybe not all, but the majority of these terms have been around for quite some years. Yet some of those have managed to stick and to
mhm.
become part of the core of brands.
Yeah.
Like for example, 3D, and now sustainability, and now you hear other terms like big data, NFTs, AR. So I believe that what made those technologies of those components of that human technology blend stick
Mhm,
is that um, they support people.
mhm,
Um, uh, when I look at AI, why I said that right now it's a hype is because, in my opinion, AI is being looked at today as a tool to, in some occasions, remove a human from the formula. Well, I
mhm,
believe that still at the center of everything we do is people. So either direct to consumer or B2B, the one common denominator that we have is that we do business with people.
mhm,
Now, the enablers of that business, yes, the technology or whatever we use to tell a story or to sell more, um, needs to take into account people and
yeah,
human nature.
yeah.
So in my last 10 years working in wholesale, what I try to do is to find the right balance between what a sales representative will find useful to sell, so to
Mhm,
tell a story, um, to propose a collection, and
mhm,
what, on the other hand, a retailer will find useful from a brand, from the sales rep. And finding that middle ground that will make both parties happy, and utilizing technology to facilitate that interaction, I believe
mhm,
is what made, at least in my experience, um, the brands that I work with successful.
mhm.
To find technology that can, like I do with sales and technology, bridge um, the world of the buyer and the world of the seller. I believe I
Um,
believe that in the last couple of months, especially, so where technology is evolving so fast that I cannot say the last couple of years. The last couple of months, we have looked at AI as a holy grail to
Hmm.
completely remove people from the equation.
Okay.
And I think AI will become ripe when it will be capable to take into account some of the nuances
Hmm.
um, that is working with people
Hmm.
and the emotion of working with people.
Yeah. I mean, I have been attending lately some sales meetings and observing like what's going on and what to do. The feeling that I get is that the trust and the relationship between a salesperson and a customer is really critical and crucial to making business. And it seems, unfortunately, that a lot of the time spent by salespeople are not necessarily productive work to increase and strengthen that relationship. And it's just very much administrative stuff, very much preparing for things, and just unproductive workflows. So I'm thinking like the first stage that I guess anyone has to prove is application of AI together with digital tools that really will um, enhance the capability of the salespeople to build trust, build relationship, right?
Absolutely agree, and I think that's where the benefit of AI will start to stick and to become to become part of society. I mean, when we were going through that list, I think what I was processing as I heard the different terms was,
Hmm.
okay, is this solving a real problem? So um, is this becoming part of people's everyday's life, right?
Yeah.
And by I guess by answering these questions, I managed to, okay, is this for me a hype or a ripe? And I think
Hmm.
AI is slowly becoming part of people's life,
Hmm.
but I don't feel that we found yet the problem that this is solving. It's
Got it.
rather being put on top of a
Yeah.
lot of things right now, um,
Hmm.
and it's very hard to really evaluate the
Hmm.
advantages that it will bring to retail. But if I have to
Yeah.
put my finger on it, it will be what you just mentioned. So AI will allow the sales rep and the buyer to analyze data to and not only their own data, but to really use the large language models strengths
Hmm.
and analyze beyond numerical data and think about forecast, think about demand planning, uh,
Hmm.
leaving enough time and space for them to improve their relationship with the buyer, to focus on
Yes.
building the trust instead of doing certain analysis on the data, which will take days or hours.
Yeah.
um, and I think
I
that's
think
where the true advantage will lie.
exactly. Yeah, I mean that could, in best case, mean that a salesperson can be dealing with many more customers, and well, just be more productive. So, just to also spend a couple of minutes on one of the other topics, I was not expecting you to say hype on digital signage in stores because I've been to some Puma stores and there seems to be digital signage instead of posters. Not that I haven't seen standard posters, but how come you think it's a hype?
I think it depends on the way it's implemented. So if you have, let's say, digital advertising in a store that enables you to tell a story, then I'm
Hmm.
all for it. Um, but I also think that um, in the way, at least what I have seen, in the way this technology has been implemented, is not really getting the customer to interact with it.
Hmm.
So I don't really see a massive advantage in
Okay.
in 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 these massive screens showing the customer something if there is no real story being told behind, or if there is no real call to action. And I think the
Got
brands
it.
haven't truly thought about this, and they have just in some occasions, right? There are some brands that are doing
Mm-hmm.
perfectly, or really thought through, and they
Yeah.
either incite the customer to interact with the screen because they have a story to tell, or they have a marketing campaign um, purposely displayed there. And
Mm-hmm.
in that case, I'm all for it. But
Yeah.
if we are talking about a massive screen just to show some pictures uh, of influencers, I think the
Mm-hmm.
customers can do that every second in their mobile phone.
I see.
And that's why I think it's a hype when it's not done properly.
Okay, so the content basically is lacking. I mean, while you were speaking, kind of my mind went to the what I feel very effective use of digital signage at the burger joints, McDonald's and so on, and they really drive you to make a decision. It's so clear that it has an impact on sales, but I guess that is still lacking proper business cases within the fashion industry.
Yes, and I mean the moment you enter McDonald's and you see the screens, you know what they're for, right?
Yeah.
You see a hamburger, you see the cost, you see the credit card terminal, you know what that is there
Yeah.
for. So as a customer, you don't really have to think much. You go there
Mm-hmm.
and you do your transaction.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go into a store, the first thing that you are interested on is the product, right? You go there to feel the shoes, to
Mm-hmm.
to to try on the jersey, and then I
Yes.
think the purpose of the screen will be, I mean, either you didn't find your shoes or the jersey or whatever you were looking for, and then the
Mm-hmm.
brand actually managed to tell you, hey, this screen has a purpose. If you didn't
Mm-hmm.
find the product here, you can look in our ecom site, right? We go back to the endless aisle topic.
Got
But
it.
then the brand needs to make a really good job at communicating that to a customer. And we know customers are not all tech savvy. Some are,
Mm-hmm.
some maybe not. So the communication of the purpose of that display of that screen is
Yeah.
crucial.
I got it. Yeah, makes sense. I remember some years ago, but I can't remember which brand. I was having a conversation about campaigns, and they had made a study of how many that bought a product on a discount or a campaign had seen the advertisement on the screens, and it was like almost none. So that's also very interesting. Like how do you really make sure that it's placed in a strategic way, that you communicate in a strategic way, and so on. But yeah, let's change topics. So last from the ripe or hype list that I want to discuss is big data. I mean, you guys at Puma have been implementing an ERP system. I am aware of that, but you also still work to some extent with Excel. Do you think that 2025 will be the year where, um, as you said, ripe for removing these unconnected or disconnected ways of moving data around?
I think for a few years now, data has become a currency, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And big companies are building infrastructures around data. So
Mm-hmm.
data is the foundation of at least almost every digital or technology project that I have worked with.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know that, or at least in my experience, when you start a project and you try to identify, okay, what do I need in order to make this happen, you realize the data is scattered all over different places, maybe in different formats, and then you start questioning what will facilitate that. And I think that's why big data right now for companies
Uh-huh.
um, is at the core of improvements, or at the core of innovation. So everyone is trying to get their data pipelines right. Everyone's trying to clean their data, starting from the source, starting all the
Mm-hmm.
way from your customers, delivery information, contact details, all the way to your profitability. So
Yes.
the KPIs in between. Now, that is the nirvana, right? When you get to a
Hmm.
stage where your data is clean and
Yes.
everything is in one place, and you can simply put Power BI or a tool like Grafana on top, do your analysis, and take data driven decisions. That is the holy grail of, I think, everyone that works with not even technology, but with retail. Because, of course,
Hmm.
every buying decision, pricing logics that we or strategies that we set are based on data.
Yes.
Um, Between that nirvana and today, there's still a big gap for massive corporations. So there will still be room for Excel. That is a
Yeah.
fact. Excel is not going to go away in the next 5, 10 years, to be absolutely honest.
Hmm.
Um, but the core of the data, hopefully, will all be in one place, and will be available to use.
Yes.
Um,
Cool. So at least from a technology standpoint, there is no blockers, hinders, or stuff that you guys or the industry are waiting for. It's a matter of implementation, if I understand you
I,
correctly.
yeah, I believe so. And I mean, with data as part of the core, what comes next is, of course, the use of, and now we're getting maybe a bit more techy, but the use of APIs. And in order to use APIs, you need to have very clean data.
Mm.
And what companies like, for example, Puma, in my experience, um, all our digital projects will be from the get-go evaluate with certain criterias, and one of those criterias is the use of APIs. I think right now, at least in technology, everyone is talking about Mac architecture.
Hmm.
Without going too much into the details of what Mac is, but part of that design strategy is to work with APIs, and
Hmm.
to be able to design tools that solve real business problems. Um, then data it's a key element of that.
Yeah, and I think it's so right to have a Mac strategy in mind, API driven. I have been part of some projects where we wanted to extract data from the B2B shop, for example, and it was simply not allowed. I mean, I think it's
Oh,
crucial going forward that if you're going to allow a player into your ecosystem of tools, that they're as open to share the data as they will expect APIs to receive the data, at least my opinion.
yes, and I mean, one of the disadvantages of, just to play devil's advocate as well, one of the disadvantages of big data is that, so we work in a mostly in an international environment. So the data that's available for all our markets is not the data that they will need sometimes.
Hmm.
Now, in the last couple of years, what I managed to find out is that even though you have very clean data available for everybody, and you believe that what you have is all the markets need to do business, you
Hmm.
find out that it's not. When you sit in a headquarter, when you
Yeah,
are working with 30 plus different countries, you realize that the data that you utilize to do business in
yeah.
Europe, or let's not even say Europe, in Germany, is
Hmm.
different than what they need in Sweden, completely different than what they need in Brazil, than what they need in Japan. Um, so then
Bec-
the model of having one standardized source of data for everybody for one
yes,
single tool sort of crumbles a little bit.
I see.
Then it,
Because they are, you mean because they are kind of enriching the core data with their own set of attributes and parameters, which then this software cannot take into account when trying to deploy it. Is that what you mean?
yes and no. So yes, on them creating or enhancing their data, creating new attributes for their data. Let's talk about products. So
Hmm.
creating new attributes for the products, or adjusting certain aspects of the data. um, and it's not like the core product is not able to digest it, so the solution, um, but the brand itself, for example, might have different data structures. So people in Japan have a certain ecosystem of tools where they do their day-to-day work, and pretty much simply the headquarters solution is not able to cater for some of the ways they or some of the data that they want to utilize during their sales meetings.
Got it. And do you think that the viable solution in a case like this is to make sure that the solutions provided by HQ is customizable and adapts to the different requirements of the markets, or is it to enforce rules from HQ about how business should be done?
I think there needs to be a ratio. So I think we, from our ivory tower of headquarters, um, shouldn't tell a market how to do business. We should provide the necessary tools and guidance and the experience of seeing how other markets interact with their customers, what has worked well with those
Mhm.
markets, and then share that experience um, with every one of our users. Now, I had the advantage and the privilege to work with 31 different countries now in my current job. And I have to say that being part of sales meetings, and here I'm talking wholesale,
Mhm.
in every market, there were minor nuances that made their selling successful or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes we arrive to a market with a specific solution, um, and after maybe 2 3 days working with the sales team of that market, we completely realized that maybe we were off the mark.
Mm.
So my
Yeah.
my my idea and my recommendation for people listening, and I think people that will listen have something to do with retail and technology, is they need to trust their sales teams as well. So if they operate in an international environment, they need to trust that their sales teams know how to sell, and they
Mhm.
and then we need to see technology as an enabler of local sales strategies,
Mhm.
not an enforcer. So enforcing global standards for sales,
Mhm.
I don't think it's the right approach. Having certain standards when it comes to solutions and technology and trying to standardize some parts of the solution, I think it's advantageous for everybody because of the economies of scale, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But still, there needs to be a room for the local sales teams to do what they do best, and is understanding their local markets, because there is no chance that I will know better than a colleague in PUMA Japan how to do business in Japan.
Got
But
it.
I can tell him how the other 30 markets are being successful with our solutions, and maybe they can get some inspiration, extrapolate that,
Mhm.
and do something specifically for Japan.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it's also a very interesting challenge from a software uh, creator point of view, because that basically means that we need to cater for a flexibility so that a salesperson can move through the sales meeting in such a way that it accommodates for that particular interaction. And I mean, I definitely also see very interesting nuances where some salespeople really want to be able to present each and every style up front, go through the full collection, make them aware of what it is about, and then they go through it again just to make a selection. While other salespeople, they're much more preparing some stuff up front, sending to the customer, and then maybe when they meet, they would just select the styles as they go through it. And then there's cases where they would just say, you know what, I know what you want. you have trust in me, we have this relationship, here are the stuff that you really should be considering, and then we can move in and out some certain stuff. And I think in all of these cases, if you build the application just for one case, it's probably going to be very limiting for the other cases. But at the same time, what's interesting about challenge for us is that how can we do that without making the application very complex, right? With too many buttons, too many workflows, too many navigational parts. So, but I'm on with you that there's, for example, in one of the cases that when I asked, like, why do you go through every style? Well, I said it's the beginning of the selling period, and I just want to get a reaction, get a feel. That is why I do it right now. And then I will change my ways. And if it's a key account, I do it this way. If it's a field account, I do it another way. Extremely interesting.
And that is why, and that's the sweet spot of the human digital blend that we were talking about at the very beginning, because tools and digital solutions again should be an enabler of a person. They need to supercharge the person so that the
Yes.
person can do their job better. And as part of this human digital formula, I think there are three main ingredients that I believe have allow us, at least so far in the last 10 years in Puma, to be successful in this blend. And the first one is the configurability of our solutions. And this is exactly what you just mentioned. So we are, for a few years now, on a journey to use SaaS solutions, rather than in-house developed solutions. And the reason why is that we believe that SaaS solutions are being managed by people that know how to do that better than we do. So
Mhm.
Puma, as an example, is a great brand at creating cool products, resonating with athletes and sports enthusiasts, and now also fashion. Um, we are not a development or a software company, so we rely on those companies that we partner with to put a best in class product together that we can use. Now, the configurability of that product is something that we encourage the company to allow, because like we just said, the small nuances between markets is what has allowed us, for example, to roll out our solutions in all continents in over 30 countries. So the first part of the formula would be configurability of the product per se.
Mhm. May I just, before you go to the second one, Andres,
Mhm.
just comment on that part? Something that we are now looking into and conceptualizing is actually to use AI for that particular case. So if we can keep like an AI functionality that kind of learns how you usually use, or you can direct it like, this is how I would like uh, the flow to work like, that it can actually offer you to some extent a customized UI and make configurability very easy all the way down to the salesperson, to the user level. And we have, I mean, I hope that we'll be able to show you at some point in time what that actually feels like.
I can always count on you showing me innovative stuff
But cool.
all the time. No, but that sounds, I mean, that's at the root of the conversation. That's where I do see AI as a ripe and not a hype. When the use of AI has a clear problem to solve, and in this case is, okay, how can we take a SaaS solution that it's mostly generic, and how can we adapt this to a culture, to a market, and even to a person? Right? How does this person work? Right? And if the AI, if we are somehow able to train the AI, um, to put
Yeah.
together a solution to the problem of being too generic and trying to sell the same way to everyone,
Mhm.
then I think that is a very interesting idea. I would
Yeah.
love to see whatever you have to show me.
certainly.
Um, right. So in that formula of the human and digital, I think configurability of the solutions is key to
Mhm.
enable any sales representative to do their job better and
Mhm.
to enhance the relationship between them, the customer, and the brand. I
Mhm.
think the second part, I think, is I work mostly in B2B. But what I have noticed is that the bridge between B2B and D2C is every time, or the gap is reducing and getting smaller and smaller. And I do, because I do see mostly functionalities or certain ways of selling being transferred from D2C to B2B. There are still many differences in the way people buy, but in the way people offer and in the
Mhm.
way people sell, the similarities are massive between D2C and B2B.
Yeah.
And the one common denominator between the two is still people, right?
Mhm.
So, but
Yes.
being able to extrapolate, like for example, seamless user experiences from B2C and applying that into the B2B ecosystems is
Mhm.
key for the buyer to feel comfortable purchasing from your brand because people are used to going into ecom, any website, um, utilizing certain filters, they're going into Amazon, going into Zalando. Like
Yeah.
these brands make it so easy for them to shop, that when the moment they open their laptops and they go to any B2B portal, they
Mhm.
expect the same
Yes.
easiness, right? They
Yeah. Yeah.
know this is not their personal shopping experience. They know, I mean, they're not stupid. They know this is their job. They're purchasing bulk quantities mostly.
Mhm.
But the brain is so ingrained in the way you interact with your mobile phone, with your laptop every single day, that is
Mhm.
what the brain expects. So if we as product managers of B2B tools, if we manage to take the best D2C practices and
Yes.
apply them for a seamless shopping experience in B2B, that is key
Mhm.
number two, in my opinion.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Um, and I think the last point that sort of wraps this up for me in what the formula has been for the last 2 3 years of my work and what my team does
Mhm.
is so data and segmentation of the data.
Mhm.
So what I mean with that is that we spoke about having clean data as the enabler of other business decisions.
Mhm.
Now, what data also allow us to do is to tailor make our offerings. It allows us to tailor make our strategies when it comes to pricing, when it comes to even marketing campaigns, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and having solutions that allow us not only to read the data, but also to take that data, crunch it down, and take some actionable insights from it, and then apply it.
Yeah.
That's where I believe digital solutions will come in place throughout this whole data value chain, you can call it.
Mhm. Uh, Amazing. So, Andres, I would like to try out one more last segment and maybe end with this segment with you.
Hmm?
So I hope you're up for this challenge. And
Always.
yeah, the segment is called priorities. All right, and
Yeah.
you're going to get some dilemmas now. I'm going to give you two options. You have to choose which one. And basically, what I'm interested in is to know what you think that brands in general, or you can from your experience, are more likely to invest in or focus more on in
Hmm?
2025 compared to last year, right? So in
Okay.
comparison to last year, which of these two options are they going to invest more in?
Hmm?
Um, and yeah, ready to
Ready?
hear the 9 topics?
Yes.
Here we go. The first one: direct to consumer channels versus traditional wholesale partnerships compared to last year, which one are going to increase more in terms of investment?
I think one of the most obvious cases is the little battle, and not so little, between Adidas and Nike. So if you
Mm-hmm.
look at Nike, Nike decided, I think a few years ago, to completely shut off all their wholesale partners and try to go for a full-on direct-to-consumer strategy that completely backfired.
Mm-hmm.
While Adidas, since the appointment of their new CEO, went into a completely different direction, and they are now serving more wholesale partners than ever. Um, and all you have to do is look at the results in 2024 and what the forecast is for 2025 for both companies, and you
Yeah.
can tell why I think everyone will start now investing in wholesale partners.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a simple explanation, simple and short, of why it backfired?
Um, Absolutely. I mean, if you take into account the amount of stores and the amount of reach that you can
Mm-hmm.
get, and accessibility of your product by the end consumer,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you take into account all the retailers that you can serve, um, there is no in my eyes, no logical way that you can think you can make that money only with D2C. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you also need to take into consideration the the brand that you work with. Certain brands
Mm-hmm.
are simply never going to work with wholesale partners. But here we're talking about luxury brands mostly.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about commercial brands, the reach that you get, the amount of stores, the visibility that you get by working with big wholesalers like Foot Lockers, JD, this
Yes.
is simply something that you will never manage to
Mm-hmm.
completely cover
Replace,
with your
right?
direct
Yeah.
to consumer.
Yeah, makes sense when you say it like that. All right. Next one. Expanding presence on online marketplaces versus enhancing own e-commerce platforms.
It's the same. I think it's the same approach. This is just wholesale versus D2C, but on the internet.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I believe we are all still going to invest in big markets like Zalando, like About You. I mean, About You
Mm-hmm.
just recently got acquired by Zalando.
Mm-hmm.
But these smaller e-com sites will either be acquired by massive key accounts, and now
Mm-hmm.
marketplaces are considered key accounts for brands. Again, think about Zalando, think about Amazon,
Yeah, yeah.
and I will even go one step further. Um, Certain marketplaces that are not driven by volume, but
Mm-hmm.
rather driven by visibility, like
Uh,
think about Farfetch, for example.
yes.
Farfetch is a marketplace for fashion, but here we are talking about creating hype, creating trends. And if
Correct.
your brand is not listed, if you don't have products in these marketplaces, you simply do not exist in that
Got it.
in that marketplace.
Makes sense.
So definitely investments are gonna go into creating bigger, better partnerships with online marketplaces.
What does it mean in terms of focus and investment interest in your own web shop? I'm not your necessarily Pumas, but
Mhm.
what do you think in general about the brand's interest in their own web shops? Like it was soaring during the pandemic, right? Like everyone suddenly had to invest a lot, but where are we now?
Mm. Well, I think the brand's own web shop is still a window to their products. It's still a window to their stories, fully managed by the brand. Because at the end of the day, when you work with a marketplace, you give the
Hmm.
marketplace your product, and then you
Hmm.
sort of disintend from it, right?
Okay,
And the brands still need to come across as authentic. And I think authenticity will play a key role in 25 and 26. Um,
okay.
and your own website together with your stores, but probably your own website is one of the few places where you can still actually tell the stories of your brand, where you can
Mhm.
connect with your customers. So companies will continue to invest in their own website, in their own direct to consumer. That's a
Mhm.
fact. Um, but I think the investment will be disproportionate versus
Got it.
versus the investment they will make in building partnerships with wholesalers.
Makes sense. All right. Uh, third one, building brand loyalty programs versus acquiring new customers.
I think none of those two. I think what the brands won't focus on either keeping or acquiring, but rather the brands will focus on resonating with a specific type of person. Like brands try to present themselves in a certain way. At the
Mhm.
end of the day, people are like we are emotional beings, and we buy wherever we feel represented,
Yes.
or we buy to feel part of something. And I think brands started to understand this, and they started to find out what is their DNA, what's in their core, what does my brand stand for. Am I a sports brand? Am I a fashion brand? Do I resonate with freedom? Do I resonate with dedication in sports, right? And
Mhm.
trying to find who do you stand for, and
Mhm.
what the brand stands for will be the key. So the focus
Interesting.
will drift away from, okay, this is
Mhm.
my core market. This is the people that I serve, and this is the people that I could potentially serve. And
Mhm.
we're gonna drift away from that, and the brand is gonna focus on presenting itself in a very authentic way,
Mhm.
and then the people that relate with the brand will be your customers, and they will come to you in this case.
Very cool. Very cool. So not necessarily putting a lot of effort into loyalty programs where you get like 25% discounts and newsletters being pushed to you, or that you put a lot of advertisement on Google and so on to drive traffic, but more authentic brand building, communicating what you stand for and then resonate with customers, consumers.
Absolutely,
Makes
absolutely. And
sense.
then that certain loyalty then comes organically.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's move through some of them that are left. This one right up your alley. B2B self-service platforms versus assisted salesperson-led wholesale tools.
I think we are going to focus on giving the necessary tools to the sales associate for him to drive forward volumes. So what we have experienced is that, I mean, you need a blend of both things. That
Sure.
that is a fact. So you need the
It,
tools for your customers to still make their
Mhm.
own purchases, to still
Mhm.
interact with the brand and have access to your products, your data. But the majority of the big volumes are still driven by a sales associate, because, like I said, we do business with people,
Yeah.
and a customer might place sorry, a retailer buyer might place a reorder of, I don't know, 2-3 thousand euros on his own, but it's very unlikely that he will place a pre-order of your new collection worth 300,000-400,000 euros on his own.
Mhm.
He
Yes.
still wants to be consulted, and I think that's the purpose of our tools, is to allow our sales associates to become retail consultants, because
Mhm.
that's exactly what they are. They're not only punching in orders, they are consulting our retailers.
Mhm.
So I still believe that we need to give them
Yeah.
the necessary tools to become retail consultants.
Mhm. That's a very nice framing. I mean, I guess since again pandemic, there's been a lot of investment into the B2B self-service. I guess most brands, as far as I know, didn't even have necessarily a proper B2B self-service tool, and now everyone has kind of come to a quite nice state. And maybe it's me biased, but I definitely see that still quite some salespersons rely on PowerPoints, PDFs, and Excels. And
Exactly.
I guess, mhm. Cool.
Exactly. So just one more point on the topic, because it's actually quite close to my heart, this topic.
Mhm,
um, self-service was the goal 8 years ago.
mhm,
So that was the objective, to reach a stage in which the customer does everything on their own. But what I have learned across the line is that self-service is a must. Self-service is expected by the customer, but what will differentiate the sales meetings, or what will differentiate across brands, is the sales rep. So if the
mhm. Yeah,
customer trusts sales rep, not if the customer trusts the software.
yeah, yeah.
And again, the software becomes the enabler of the sales reps in order
Mhm,
for him to do more business with the customer.
mhm. Beautifully said. All right. Reducing cost versus growing top line revenue, 2025.
It depends. I think this depends. I will dare to say that depends on which boardroom you are at.
Mhm.
If you
Got it.
are in the boardroom of a company that has seen in the last 2, 3 years double-digit growth, I don't think they want to slow down and reduce costs. They will rather
Mhm,
invest more in marketing, invest in their value chain, and
mhm.
keep getting market value. I mean, I do see brands like, for example, Hoka on, and these are smaller brands that are
Yeah.
no longer small, that they are very relevant in the market. They took market share from big players.
Mhm.
I think cost cutting is not in their dictionary yet,
Got it.
while you have other brands that maybe oversaturated on projects or on resources during COVID, because they were
Mhm,
riding a wave that is no longer there.
mhm.
In that case, they find themselves in an oversaturated market with a lot of brands and players, and they have massive structures that simply won't allow them to grow more, because they grew
Mhm.
to, let's say, their not their limits, but almost.
Yeah.
So they cannot go
Yeah.
up, then they have to start cutting down. So I think that's a decision that will be really based on the boardroom that you sit at.
Got it. So it's a little bit nuanced. All right.
Mm.
So what do you think about expanding physical retail space versus expanding digital channels?
What I have seen as a trend right now is the expansion of digital brands,
Hmm.
or only online brands, into the physical space. So
Nice.
especially thinking about retail. So when it
Okay.
when I think about retail today and last year, I think about a lot of smaller brands, like crawling their way up and getting market share, because usually what I see is that these smaller brands, they do manage to resonate better
Hmm.
with the young consumer, because they have
Hmm.
they have really unique stories to share, because they are small, they have a purpose, they're sustainable, and they have all these factors that make them unique, right? They're not the big
Yeah.
conglomerate, massive corporation selling 20,000 products every year. So
Hmm.
these brands are growing fast. Just think about, there is a massive brand in the UK called Gymshark,
Hmm.
that started fully online, and now it's over 1.5 billion, and
Yeah.
it was fully online.
Yeah.
Represent is another British brand, sports brand, that started fully online, and
Yeah.
both these two UK brands, for example, open up their first flagship stores last year, one
Yeah.
in London, one in New York, and they have massive expansion plans. So I think, also coming out of COVID, people
Hmm.
want to shop in the physical stores as well. They
Yeah.
want to have that feeling. So my in my opinion, we are going to continue seeing that developing. So online brands
Mhm.
moving into the brick and mortar space.
That I mean that is actually quite cool. I mean, it will create a much more vivid streets, right? Like more interesting offers here and there, so people go back to the shopping streets and so on. So I guess
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
a cool. And talking about product ranges and that they, have more of a narrow assortment that speaks to the audience, and then the corporate ones have bigger. So expanding the product range versus focusing on core offerings.
Definitely focusing on core offerings.
Mm-hmm.
So I have experienced this personally in my current job. I have a lot of friends in the industry as well, and everyone is trying to simplify.
Mm-hmm.
So we come from a world in which, like I said before, every single season, and let's say we have 2 seasons usually in the fashion industry with spring, summer, and autumn, winter. You have tens of thousands of products to sell,
Yeah.
and the brain can only focus on so many, right? Either as a retailer buyer or as an end consumer.
Yeah.
And I believe the brands are starting to realize that when you have 30,000 products, it's very difficult to make the end consumer understand what those products stand for. What's really the DNA of the brand behind those products. So everyone, I
Mm-hmm.
think, will start trimming down more and more and more to make also the processes around product creation, go to market, and then
Yeah.
eventually selling more simple.
Yeah. It sounds reasonable for sure. Cool. And then last one, uh, Andres here. Unfortunate to end the nice talk, but I guess we'll continue later on at some point. So, last one is enhancing data privacy measures versus leveraging customer data for personalization. How much do you want to hide data away, make it secure, versus really make sure that it is used?
Well, leaving aside the legal aspect of the
Yeah,
topic, right? So let's
yeah,
let's
yeah.
let's 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 think that we are in a world that we can leverage data. I think leveraging data to support the in my case, I will focus on the retailer buyers, or still in the B2B sphere, to support the buyer make better purchasing decisions will be
Mhm.
massively appreciated.
Yeah.
um, because I think a big chunk of the work of a buyer is to review the past results of his purchase decisions,
Mhm.
plus taking into account what seems to be the potential opportunities that are within a range of products for the new season, and then
Yeah.
make his current buying decision. If we can leverage the information and the data available for that specific person
Hmm.
and tell him, hey, in the past, you bought 200 products, out of which 180 were successful. This was your gap. What about these products now?
Hmm.
If we manage to do that right and not be um and not, I don't know what the word would be, but not overstep the boundaries of completely telling, hey, this is exactly, and daring to
Hmm.
say this is exactly what will make your buying successful,
Hmm.
but rather recommending something based on the data. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely all for it.
No, it makes sense if people can be made aware and being suggested with good arguments, but then let them do the final decision. Especially in fashion, it is not necessarily always just data driven, right? Sometimes you want to
Exactly.
have a certain style to your store, or you know your customers in a certain way, or maybe you have an idea of what the trend will be like. So it will anyway never be able to be properly predicted, but at least not make any, I mean, unnecessary mistakes, and make sure that
Absolutely.
you don't have unnecessary gaps.
Absolutely. Yes.
Uh, well, Andres, I could have taken a couple more hours to just extract insights from you. This has been very fun, very, very insightful. So thank you for coming by the Behind the Scenes pod, and I hope to have you in more episodes in the future.
Thank you for having me. This was a great experience.
Thank you, Andres.
Take care. Ciao, ciao.
Bye bye.